Paranormal, Book 20, Part 2, Tarot Cards. Don't forget to subscribe and like for more upcoming content. The smell of incense, the scent of which the room reeks, this room that is filled with a strange green light. I wasn't sure if it was reflecting off the walls or if there was a source for this green light. Eastern designs fill this place, and hanging from the ceiling is an incense holder, while spread about the room are locked arabesque windows. Even the carpets are the thick Iranian type, ankle-deep. The interior designer of this room was keen to lend it an Arabian atmosphere which stirs the American imagination, to the extent that he placed a bare-chested Negro, replete with golden vest by the door, covered with curtains, to give those who enter the impression that this was a slave from the Arabian Nights. And there was a beautiful maiden carrying a big pitcher. She made rounds about the room, filling the guest's cup with something I thought was probably coffee. So this is the den of dreams. I heard the tiger's purring drone. Welcome, Mr. Colby, and you, Dr. Refaat, and Mr. Sheldon. I was shaken by this start and was inclined to believe that this was a miracle, but then I remembered that Colby was a blabbermouth and had certainly told the man everything about us. They were sitting on the floor, on golden-colored Arabian cushions, around a low table in the shape of a hexagon, like something made by the best of craftsmen. But it's always this contrived Eastern atmosphere which Westerners cannot imitate properly, for they know nothing about us except the Arabian Nights and the Delacroix paintings. All faces were covered by the greenish light. I joined the setting, chose one of the cushions, and sat Indian style, crossing my legs. Harry sat on my right and Colby on my left, and we began checking out the faces of those sitting here. There were 5, plus Lucifer and Clarton. After a few minutes, 2 women entered the room and sat at the low table with us. One was a fair-looking young lady, and the other an older woman with the appearance of a mother who had lost her son in the ancient Hyksos wars. For a few minutes silence reigned. We simply exchanged looks between us. When will all this nonsense end? Then Lucifer started speaking in his low, deep voice. Of what exactly I don't know. Just endless, useless talk about the unity of the universe and the Manichaean creed and reaching the truth by understanding ourselves more, etc. I leaned over to Colby's ear, whispering, "This madman, he is a magician, a fortune-teller, or a false prophet, the likes of which your country is filled with, and who in my country are carried away to the asylum to be cured by a few electrical shock treatments." Colby responded, "Take it easy. Don't mock him. He is—" And here the tiger voice echoed, saying, "I am a scientist, Dr. Refaat, nothing more, nothing less." I raised my eyes and found him staring at me with fixed black eyes. What strength is in these eyes, as if they were created for hypnosis. As he lifted something in his hand, I heard him say, "Have you heard about tarot cards?" Looking at the cards he held in his fist, I replied, "Sure, I've heard about them, and yes, I know of them. Could I ever forget Mother Marcia in Jamaica and her prophecy about the castle and the red dust? I know these ominous cards with their drawings, but I don't know their meaning." Looking into the eyes of those seated, Dr. Lucifer said, "There are some who hold that the word tarot is taken from the hieroglyphic word tarush, meaning the royal path, and others who insist its etymology is from the Latin word rotaro, meaning the circle. Many have tried to discover when and how these cards were made, but all have failed." The homeowner, Clarton, said while lifting his monocle to his face, "In the book The Ancient World, the author Court claims that these cards first appeared in Europe in the 14th century, but had appeared in the East long before, maybe back as far as the Pharaonic era." One of those seated, a dark-skinned man with a bleak face, said, "Stuart Kaplan is now writing a book titled Tarot Cards, in which he speaks about the mystery of these cards." Not understanding, I asked hastily, "I don't understand. What is the use of these cards in the first place? Isn't it just a fortune-teller's way of dealing cards?" Lucifer's piercing eyes moved over me, and I heard a raspy voice say, "It's not that simple. Dr. Jung, Freud's famous student, studied this and pronounced that tarot is a method of enhancing the senses and follows a scientific curriculum that suits the human existence in this universe." Still, he continued on, "And the British scientist, Levy, said that tarot allows those who never saw the world to own the full knowledge of the universe and can speak handily on any topic. By the way, you are Egyptian, Dr. Refaat, so the duty would fall on you to speak to us of the tarot, as the tarot most likely is an invention of the ancient pharaohs. Directing his words to me, Mr. Clarton added, "They claimed that the ancient Egyptian priests had written in all the gathered secrets of their civilization as it was coming to an end, and this was in the year 1000 B.C. In a tense voice, the young lady asked, "And how did the tarot reach Europe?" The answer came. It reached Great Britain with the gypsy tribes, and the first tarot was made in Henry VIII's era. Here Harry cut the thread of the conversation, asking, "Let's leave off from the history of these cards. What exactly are you intending to do?" A mysterious smile spread on Lucifer's face, and he began shuffling the cards without looking at the girl, saying, "I intend to take you on a rare supernatural journey, and the tarot is my tool. It was contingent upon me to tell you something of it beforehand. And now, who will be the first?" Silence prevailed. I leaned over to Colby's ear and whispered, "Who is this Dr. Lucifer anyway?" Whispering back, without averting his eyes from the scene, he said, "No one knows. They say he is from Hungary and that his name is Franz Lucifer, and he came to the U.S. 3 months ago. They also say that he amazed all with his tarot readings, even Mr. Clarton, to the point that Mr. Clarton, who is not given to amazement, hosted him permanently in his house and made this room especially for him." "He speaks about who is first," I said. "First for what exactly?" Colby responded, "I don't know. Maybe he will demonstrate some of his predictive abilities." Very slowly the man's piercing eyes made a round over us. In this moment it occurred to me how silly was my notion about strong eyes. For eyes alone are not able to express anything. All they can do is widen to express horror and constrict to express cunning. It is the eyebrows that give the eyes their full effect, giving the eyes the expression of kindness and weakness, and giving the impression of sadness and also the impression of evil. Scarier still is that above Lucifer's eyes were only horizontal eyebrows expressing nothing at all, and that in itself frightened my heart. The sound of the satiated tiger echoed. "The truth, I tell you, for here I find among you he who deserves my pity. For among you, friends, is the one who does not believe, and for him fills me with remorse. And among you is the mocking one, from him I feel annoyed. And among you is the careless one. To him my advice is to lend me his mortal ears for a bit of time." I felt anxious, as I differ from the others in that all the above apply to me. Truly I don't believe and don't care, and I will mock. Therefore I'm the reason for this man's remorse and annoyance, and it is my duty to lend him my mortal ears for some time. Dr. Lucifer regarded me with a cold look, sipping his coffee in front of him, and aimed behind my back. "No," I said emphatically as I saw the maiden approaching to pour some coffee in my cup, obeying Lucifer's order. "For a known reason. After my last experience with Colby, I'm not prepared to drink anything potentially containing a hallucinogen. I want to be at full brain capacity and sober in order to see what might happen, if anything really would." Then Dr. Lucifer continued, "It is my place to assume that those who follow me are keen to gain awareness of their future. And it surprises me that this gathering coincidentally has bleak destinies. Each of you wants a tiny glimpse into tomorrow, and it is unwise for you to see this destiny. So is it true that you are all insistent upon it?" Silence lingered for a short time. I'm not used to seeing a fortune-teller who informs his customers that their destinies are black and their tomorrows bleak. Rather, it is customary to tell them that everything will be fine and that the coming days are filled with happiness. Anyway, I don't believe in this nonsense, and my opinion here is strict and unshakable. Humans cannot predict the unknown. And if this charlatan really knew the unknown, he would have ruled the world within a week. Because the human that knows the unknown could win every lottery and predict where the roulette ball will stop, and would know all the plans of war and bank account numbers and sad questions. A man like this would not be sitting in a room, sitting on coffee, trying to amaze us." Here the old lady broke through my thoughts, saying in a thin and shaky voice, "You have aroused our curiosity, Dr. Lucifer. Do you mean to say that all those sitting here have bleak futures? What is the secret of this coincidence?" Smiling his mysterious smile, Lucifer replied, "Because all who sit here, or most of them, are from those who play with fire. So there is no coincidence in that such a number of those gathered in one place will get their fingers burnt." The woman sighed and mumbled, "You're really scaring me with all this, and I can only ask that I be the first." She reached her hand to Dr. Lucifer, who handed her the cards to shuffle herself, as he wanted her to pollinate the cards with her magnetic character and to concentrate her thinking on the cards alone. In my ear, Colby whispered, "In its full form, tarot cards consist of 78 cards, 56 of which are called the smaller secret. From these was born the cards as they are known now. As for the other 22, they are called the bigger secret. And within these cards is a certain organization which allows the knower of the tarot to find within it a full story." I said, "So this man is going to tell us 7 stories?" Colby replied, "For sure, as there are 7 of us sitting here." The woman had finished shuffling the cards and returned them to Dr. Lucifer, who took them and calmly began flipping them over in a particular order. The mysterious bright colors appeared to my eyes within the strange green light, and Dr. Lucifer began to speak. And this was the second horror circle. The wheel has turned and will not stop until he decides so, for he's the jolly good fellow, which nobody can deny. The first tale, What Happened to Louise, starring Lillian Mazursky. You were so close to the answer, my lady, but you never understood it. Name, Lillian Mazursky. Age, 56. Occupation, former secretary. Status, widow and mother of 3. Residency, New York. Nationality, American of Polish origins. Her father immigrated to the U.S. in 1902 and worked in a print works. Hobbies. Mrs. Mazursky is very social. She loves people's company, and on this night her daughter, Louise's friend, accompanied her to this meeting of supernatural society. In addition, she enjoys listening to 1920s music, especially Nat King Cole. As he dealt the cards in front of him, Dr. Lucifer said, "And now, let's see, Mrs. Mazursky," and the woman startled when she heard her name. I didn't see any miracle in that, as it is the easiest thing to know the names of the attendees at a party. The first card was the Magician card, representing a wizard standing before a table filled with things. Later I found out that this card represents craftsmanship and self-confidence, while the Frenchman, Antoine Court, sees it as a symbolizing the first century of Christianity, while psychologists see it as the symbol of the emergence of the self in a human soul. The second card was the Hung, and, as usual, it represents a young man hanging by his right foot to a gallows. This card refers to self-sacrifice and surrender. The third card depicts a man wrestling a lion. And then came the World card, then the Justice card, and finally came the ominous card, Death, which shows a skeleton holding a sickle and taking off heads with it. Later on I found that this unique way of drawing death in the human imagination is originally taken from the tarot cards. And I also discovered that the number of this bleak card is number 13. It's always card 13. The woman's eyes widened in terror when she saw this card, shouting at Lucifer, "Would you explain to me the meaning of this?" Dr. Lucifer organized the cards in order in which they came out and said, "If we follow the psychologist's opinion in these cards, my lady, we would say you are suffering an excessive sense of self-awareness, which pushes you to sacrifice to adapt with society, when only then you are fully spiritual with the world and reborn, and your fear of death ends." He then smiled his foul smile and continued, "But here we are not about the science of psychology. Magic, my lady, is the name of the game, so listen carefully to what I will say." On this day a few years ago, Mrs. Mazursky returned home, feeling annoyed. The whole day was jinxed, for when she went to the supermarket she could not find her pocketbook, and left only to find a ticket on her windshield, having parked on the wrong side. Blood rose to her cheeks, and she reversed the car, of course breaking the bumper of the car behind her. The car owner got out of his car, swearing, inquiring about which law allows such geezers to drive in the heart of New York, wrecking simple people's cars, and they have no time for this nonsense. Anyway, to make a long story short, the miserable lady had to pass a check to the man, who was fuming with anger. Then, having decided the day was jinxed enough, the best policy now was to return home, to have a cup of milk, and get some sleep before another disaster happens. Hence, you see, Mrs. Mazursky went back home, and here we notice a few things regarding this lady. Firstly, she lives in a suburb, a bit distant from the heart of the city. Secondly, there are no near neighbors for 2 miles round. Thirdly, she is not home alone because she has her daughter, Louise, who is the last left in the family, after Mark had gotten married and moved to Ohio, and soon afterward Bob had married and moved to California. And here Dr. Lucifer ceased telling the story and turned to Mrs. Mazursky and asked her in calming tones, "Is everything meticulous up to this point?" Her face paled as she mumbled, "It's okay. Continue then." Dr. Lucifer continued with the story. Louise was not at home because she had gone out with her new friend Harriet. That is how Mom found out when she read the sticker on the fridge. She pulled it off with anger and crumpled it between her fingers. She opened the fridge, took out a big pitcher of milk, and poured herself a cup. Since this Harriet entered Louise's life, Louise is no longer herself. The daughter, 17, sensitive, tender, who plays piano and reads poetry at night. Some changes have occurred in her. Louise is thin, wears glasses and classic prudish outfits. As for Harriet, she is obnoxious, red-haired, wears anything and everything, and it's a shame that her mom never found courage within herself to kick Harriet out and leave her daughter alone. And since that day, Louise would go out late and stay out all night. When she returned home, the noisy rock and roll music blared from her room, repeating the worst songs by the band The Who or other devilish names of so-called bands. The mother used to feel so comforted with her daughter's friend Mary, her name echoing her nature to a large extent, and she only wanted Louise to spend more time with Mary. Lucifer then turned his eyes to the girl sitting with us and asked, "Am I mistaken in that, Mary?" The girl moved her hair to cover part of her face and said, "No, please continue." Up until now, this story is totally normal. Who among parents here never went through dealing with a teenager? Friends can be like flames of fire until it is extinguished. Your son among them until he burns. He could be blocks of ice, but as soon as your son touches them, they freeze. In short, you can never be safe from them, and it is your duty as a father to choose moderate friends so that they don't freeze or burn him. These are thoughts that went through necessarily the mother's head. She found herself spilling the milk distractedly, then changing clothes and going to bed, feeling like she couldn't possibly eat. The big difference in age between her and her daughter, more than 40 years, makes the chance of communicating practically impossible. It would have suited her better to be her grandmother. She herself does not know exactly the circumstances that led to her getting pregnant at age 40, to the point where she anticipated her daughter to be born with mental disability or a horrible birth defect. But none of that happened, thank God. The sound of the door opening, her daughter's footsteps sneaking inside. She rushed to the entryway, shouting at her daughter, "Aren't you going to eat dinner?" She purposely avoided saying hello or even announcing her presence, in order to maintain her image of being stern with her daughter. For the sad truth is, she could never be a firm mother with her little girl. "I ate out," said the girl, pale, altogether disheveled in appearance, and she rushed to her room, saying nothing further. This time Mrs. Mazursky could no longer bear what happens almost every night. She rushed to the girl's room and snapped the door open to find her daughter standing by the window, looking out into the dark night. "Louise," she said angrily, "what exactly is wrong with you? Are you sure you're okay?" The girl whispered without turning to face her mother, Please, don't worry about me." But worry was very much the state Mrs. Mazursky was in. Worried for a long time now. Worried to the extent of becoming an amateur detective, checking up on her daughter, searching her room corner by corner, pushing the girl's sleeves up at night, checking for any marks. She had read that teenage addicts wear winter clothes, even in the summer, to cover their wrists. Here it was summertime, and Louise was wearing a long-sleeved shirt. Mrs. Mazursky asked her, "Where did you and Harriet go?" "Nowhere," Louise answered while making a dismissive sound with her lips. "We went to the movies. We visited some of our girlfriends. It was all very boring." Mrs. Mazursky then asked, "Well then, when did you have dinner?" Louise replied, "It wasn't dinner per se, some French fries and a Pepsi." "Well then, it's time to play the role of the kind mother." Mrs. Mazursky said, "I'll prepare you some dinner, and you will eat it." Louise protested, "But I'm not—" Her mother answered, "Please, Louise, just do this one thing," and she went away to the kitchen to warm up some liver and onions. How she wished her husband Paul was there. The father figure is an important thing only single moms feel. Exactly like a mother's care is such an important thing only understood by fathers who try to change their kids' diapers. Paul knew of these things, and who knows, maybe she was delusional in her suspicions. Maybe her daughter was undergoing a passing psychological crisis in an age who often feels social deprivation keenly. Yes, she surely needs a psychiatrist or expert opinion. What's happening is not— "Ouch!" she yelled as she looked at her finger, realizing she had cut herself. The knife had sliced into her finger. Blood was dripping on the marble countertop. "Mom!" Louise exclaimed, worried. "Did you hurt yourself?" She then drew closer to her mom and took her finger. When did she get into the kitchen? The mother remembered nothing of it. The important thing is, she held her mom's hand and with kindness started licking the blood from it, which was a scene her mom was used to and did not surprise her. What surprised her were the clear signs of content and enjoyment in Louise's features. It was that mysterious glow in her eyes, as if she is a cat licking up milk with satisfaction. The mother pulled her finger away without another word. She ran to the bathroom to get a Band-Aid from the medicine cabinet. When she returned to the kitchen, she found Louise sitting with her plate, eating with obvious hunger, and telling her, "You have to be more careful, Lily." Mrs. Mazursky replied, "My name is Mom, and for the 1000th time I tell you, I'm from the older generation, and we would never call our mothers by her given name." "Come on, Lily," Louise replied. "Don't get hung up on words like that." "Shut up, Louise," Mrs. Mazursky snapped, and the girl did. As night deepened, both women went to their respective rooms to sleep. They did not even exchange good nights. But the mother in her bed could not be at ease or calm. The loud noise of rock music from her child's room foiled her every effort to catch some sleep. Finally she heard the stereo shutting off and the distinct click of the light switch in the girl's room. Total darkness. The steady sound of the clock. The sound of her own breathing. But now she's hearing another sound, one that does not belong to the night orchestra she knows well. What is the origin of this sound, and what is its source? She got up and lightly went to the door and listened. There was no doubt about what she heard. These are the sounds of tiny barefoot feet crawling along the floor. No need to listen any more. She opened the door to see for herself. For sure, it was her daughter's feet, as thieves do not have tiny bare feet as far as she knows. She opened the door as the house door was closing. So, the girl has left. But where to? And at this hour? She ran to the living room, turning on all lights. Opening the apartment door, she stood staring into the darkness outside, breathing the summer air pregnant with the smell of orange blossoms. No one as far as the eye could see. She pleaded, "Louise!" at the top of her lungs. But there was no one there to reply except for a dog's distant barking. As if a final touch added by a genius director to a strange scene. "Louise!" she yelled again. She closed the door quickly, ran to her daughter's bedroom door, opened it. The girl's bed was empty and organized. She had never slept there. On the bed there was something. It was her daughter's glasses, without which she could barely see. So Louise is out. Out to a place she does not know, and there was no such place near this isolated house. What's worse, she went out barefooted and without her glasses. How could she possibly manage or even see? Mrs. Mazursky started looking about the room, and soon she found a pile of books. Drawing her eyes closer, she read the titles of these books. And what titles! About ghosts, I Walked with Zombies, and the third one, Vampires Live. And there were some magazines with covers showing vampires pouncing on screaming women's necks. Damn this culture! What interests her daughter in such heinous, depressing topics? Is it related to her obvious change in character? Is this the first night she leaves home? If it were, how could she not hear her before? And here the horrible answer came, as a fully developed image in her head. The thought was clear, bordering on truth. Because this is the first night she didn't take her habitual milk before going to bed. Yep, there's no doubt about it. She drinks a cup of milk every night, and she didn't tonight, because of her bad mood. So is that the only reason why she doesn't sleep? Is that the reason she heard her child's feet sneaking out? Meaning someone is slipping sleeping pills into her milk, and there are not a lot of suspects, unfortunately. These heavy thoughts were killing her, to the extent that she purposely went to the kitchen, poured herself a cup of milk, and drank it. I shall see, she told herself, if this milk is spiked with sleeping pills. If I do sleep, then I could escape from all this tension. And if I don't sleep, then my doubts are at ease, and sleep, taking over, taking. The milk was spiked. Hello, Mary. This is Louise's mom. Could you come by for a bit? Sure, ma'am. Is something wrong? Not yet, but I know it will be. And she hung up, waiting on Mary, Louise's lifelong friend, as Mary is a reasonable, logical girl. But when she did come, she did not have much to say to the mother. It seems Louise had drifted away from her, stopped visiting or calling her, for friendship cannot be bought nor demanded. And the girl could tell she had no more place in Louise's life, so she remained apart in silence. Mrs. Mazursky said, "And what about this Harriet?" Looking down at her hands, Mary replied, "She's a fool. She's unstable. But she has a magnetic personality, and everyone who deals with her goes through this suspicious phase. She tried to add me to her chain of friends, but I refused." She got goosebumps and whispered, "She really is a scary girl." Mrs. Mazursky asked her, "Why is she a scary girl?" She responded, "I don't know. Her habits, she's very pale-faced, likes the night and the dark. I've never seen her in the daytime, ever." The mother recalled the books that she found in her daughter's room and said, "And you have an idea what they do so late at night? Do you have an explanation for Louise going out alone after midnight?" Mary told her, "I don't know, Mrs. Mazursky. Maybe she is a sleepwalker?" Mrs. Mazursky replied, "She never complained of such a thing in her whole life." Mary queried, "Haven't you asked the reasons for her going out?" "Yes, I asked her in the morning after I sobered up for my blackout." And here Mrs. Mazursky remembered and related what happened. In the late morning hours she went to the girl's room and found her asleep in her bed, totally wasted, tired. Her bare feet were covered with dried mud that she had stepped in last night. So that's why the sheets get dirty so quickly. Under her eyes are two ugly dark circles, and as usual she had pulled down the sleeves and fixed the neckline of her pajama top. The mother opened one of the buttons, closing one of the sleeves, and pushed it up, to have a look at Louise's thin arm. There were no traces of needle marks, but there were two tiny holes a bit apart from each other in the flesh of her arm, as if they were caused by sharp fangs. 2 sharp fangs? The mother felt a cold chill. Why isn't Louise wearing her necklace? Why did she take off the white curtains and put instead thick dark blue ones? Why does she not shower? Professor Hendricks was a steady, trustworthy sort. He sat one leg over the other, regarding Mrs. Mazursky while she spoke, regarding her with his blue, non-blinking eyes. He was a psychiatrist, but still also fascinated with the paranormal world, and would accept demonic stories without any prejudice or misconceptions. He asked when she had finished her story, Did Louise stop showering? Yes. Does she sleep most of the day and stay up all night? Yes. And did she refuse to accompany you here to meet me? Yes. Professor Hendricks shifted his posture and mumbled, "If we took the psychiatry point of view in this, we would have two probabilities," and he stretched his fingers to count on them. First is a hysteric interaction due to stressors that surround your daughter. And the second is your daughter is addicted to some kind of drug. And then you would have noticed the usual marks, long sleeves, needle marks in the arm, flu symptoms even in summer, continuous itching, what they call coke bug, expensive items going missing at home, loss of appetite. Mrs. Mazursky replied, "Some of these symptoms exist, but most don't show on her." He told her, "We only have the non-scientific possibility, which is that your daughter is possessed. She is of the age, teenage years, and it's totally feasible that she gets possessed at this age." The mother had read the stories of exorcism of Peter Platty, and she was horrified. But she had learned a lot about the topic from the story and leaned towards believing it. Maybe out of a hidden desire in her to escape feeling that she as a mother was guilty in any way. If her daughter is hysterical or an addict, then the blame is on her. As for evil spirits, well, they come and go without rhyme or reason, and no one was to blame. The professor advised her to take an expert's opinion on the subject, and he told her of the Hungarian scientist who would be visiting America in a month, and he offered her an invitation to the party that was the scientist's inauguration. That scientist's name was Franz Lucifer. And here Dr. Lucifer stopped talking and smiled broadly, if I dare say so, and told Mrs. Mazursky, "This is your story, Mrs. Mazursky. It's all written in front of me on the tarot cards. Did I forget something?" The woman's face turned blue. I mean red, but in the green light red is closer to blue. Swallowing nervously, she said, "You know everything about the story, but how did you know it from the tarot cards?" "That's my special secret. That for what you I ask, I reply." Unable to stay silent, I told him, "I mean there should have been a card with a milk cup, a card with a skinny girl wearing eyeglasses, and a card with a kitchen knife. Otherwise, how could you tell this story?" Dr. Lucifer replied, "If tarots were that simple, it would be a child's game, and there would not be doctorships in it." He said this snobbily, and I realized the man violently hated me and that I had become his enemy. We will see shortly what he has to say about my tarots. Mrs. Mazursky said in a surrendering voice, "I've come here to you with dear Mary to know what awaits us and the solution for this problem." Lucifer replied, "You're too late, Mrs. Mazursky." "Too late for what?" "Let me tell you what will happen. On that day you will go home determined to take a stern action. You will have made a decision never to sleep at night, and it has been days since you stopped drinking the milk at night, because you don't want to miss the moment your daughter goes out. And indeed, if it never happened that the girl went out, since you became so alert to what may happen. Wise decision, and a wiser decision still would be disconnecting the phone and hiding it in your closet. But on that day you will make an even more radical decision. You will lock the girl in totally. You will choose for her a solitary imprisonment until she heals. And hence you make sure that the house has sufficient food. Then you lock the main door, put the key in the big vase in the living room. Louise goes several times during the daytime, and once at night, only to come in at a late hour. That is, of course, if we disregard her going out after you sleep. This time, no one is going out, not you nor her. And if she was suffering, was it a drug addiction? If so, then this confinement would heal her from it. And if it were a demonic possession, well, here she is right before your eyes the whole time, and you will definitely know the truth. At times the doorbell would ring, but you would ignore it, because you had told your friends, the milkman, everybody, that you and Louise are traveling to visit Louise's brother in Ohio. So, definitely, no one would miss you. All this is very lovely, but the wisdom was for you to ask one of Louise's brothers to come and help you. By my life, this is the main defect in the American family. It's broken. Your 2 sons have gone so far away, and other than a phone call once a month, it would be no different if they were long dead. You will spend hours, ma'am, watching TV. You'll prep food and go up to Louise's room, begging her to eat something. But she will remain silent, lying in bed, staring at the ceiling with glassy eyes. Sometimes you will manage to put a small piece of food in her mouth. At least that should keep her alive. But let's just say you will never feel relieved from all of this. You were expecting rage, suicide attempts that prevent you at the last second. But all this silent brooding is unbearable. And on this abnormal day you will go up to her room, and by chance she will not be there, which is not a common thing of late, and a golden chance for you to research. The same horrible books, same rock and roll tapes next to the stereo, leftover food. So you open her drawer looking for any of her writings, and you don't find anything specific except for the necklace she always wore and her glasses. And here you see a shadow moving on the wall, so you turn your head to see what it is. And you will find Louise standing at the door, smiling a devilish smile, and you will hear her say, "Find what you're looking for, Mom?" And as you look at her face, you will realize the truth. You were a complete fool. You never connected the dots between her change in personality and her enjoyment of licking the blood from your finger, her sleeping all day and staying up all night, her going out at night into the wild, and Harriet, who scares her girlfriends, and the perpetual long sleeves. She was hiding the traces of the fangs on her wrists. Why? Actually, ma'am, these are the characteristics of a vampire. The answer was so near, but you never got it. Lucifer continued, "And now, as you retreat while she is moving closer to you, you realize that you were a fool for not realizing before. A fool when you locked yourself in the same house as this starving beast. A fool when you didn't believe these words I'm telling you now. But time has passed, madam. Unfortunately, has passed." When Lucifer finished the story, for a moment there was silence except for the heavy breathing and the sound of the tarot cards he shuffled in his hands. Shortly after, Mrs. Mazursky asked him in a raspy voice, "And when is this going to happen?" Lucifer replied, "I'm uncertain. Maybe tonight when you return home." "And how do I stop it?" "That, my dear, is your problem. I just told you what will be, and it's up to you to believe it or not." The woman mumbled as if to herself, "It's hard for me to believe. I left her at home now, but I admit that an explanation of this sort has crossed my mind several times. Louise scares me. My innocent child that I breastfed is really scaring me." She sobbed silently, and Mary patted her gently to comfort her. I wanted to tell her that none of this would happen, because this Lucifer is a phony for sure, but I felt it would be better to wait until after this ominous setting. End of Part 2, to be continued. Remember to hit subscribe and share to see what happens and how Lucifer plays them all.